I'll tell you, not many games truly move me these days. Sure, once in a while I'll play a Dying Light or an Undertale, but it's rare for me to feel truly moved with video games. But there is, of course, one game that I can say has been a very moving experience for me. Released in 2015, this is one that, ever since I first played it, it has stuck with me. The game I'm talking about today is Hotline Miami 2. To fully understand Hotline Miami 2, we must first understand the first game. Developed by Janitors and released in 2012, this was a revolutionary leap for indie games. This game was characterised primarily by its tough-as-nails gameplay and amazing soundtrack. Hotline Miami 1 takes place in 1989 and follows Jacket, a man who keeps receiving phone calls telling him to visit certain areas to clear out members of the Russian Mafia. He obliges, and after several months, and some setbacks, the Russian Mafia is wiped out from Miami. This game takes place before, during and after the events of the first game, from the perspectives of several different characters and groups, all of whom will either influence the events of, or are influenced by, the events of the first game. Before we enter Act 1 proper, there's a brief tutorial. The setting for this tutorial is on a movie set for Midnight Animal, an embellished retelling of the events of the first game, with this movie serving as a metaphor for the first game. After filming, the director, representing the developers, give Martin Brown, representing the player, instructions to follow for filming of the next few scenes. After this, we go into Act 1 proper. We begin on Halloween night of 1991 with a group referred to as the Fans at a Halloween party in what appears to be their hideout. Something of note is that all the people you see at this party, with the exception of the Fans, are cameos from people who composed music for this game. After a brief conversation, the Fans decide to quote, "do this," before heading to a local gang hideout and clearing out the building, likely in an attempt to be featured on the news as was Jacket before them. Each of the Fans have their own unique skills. Corey can roll dodge, which is useful sometimes, maybe? Tony can insta-kill with his fists, at the trade-off of he can't pick up weapons. Alex and Ash work as a duo, with Alex having a chainsaw and Ash having a pistol, and Mark has 2 machine guns with 128 bullets. After this event, the Fans visit a local pizza shop, mirroring scenes from the first game, where Jacket would order pizza. We then cut to just under a week before, to a detective in a diner finishing his meal. His name is Manny Pardo, named after a real-life police officer who resided in Miami until he was sentenced to death for 8 counts of first-degree murder. The actions of Pardo mirror these murders and go on to represent crucial elements of the game's story. Finishing his meal, Pardo goes to his car and drives to a shopping centre, where he proceeds to shoot members of what appear to be the same gang from the first level. After this, Pardo heads to the entrance, to which he is greeted by several armed policemen. Pardo shows them his badge, which makes them drop their weapons, before he heads to his car. In the outro of this level, presumably the next morning, you see Pardo visiting the scene of a murder, but for a brief second you can see a camera crew flashing before his eyes before fading away. Pardo then proceeds to head back to his car. We now go to 1989, where we see Jake, the owner of one of the usable masks in the first game, shaving his head. He enters his living room, where he is greeted by a phone call from 50 Blessings, the organisation from the first game. The phone call tells Jake to visit a local news station that's currently being run by the Russian Mafia. Jake obliges and collects a sum of money on his way out. Jake's initial intentions are to get a tattoo, but he storms out of the parlour once finding that the tattoo parlour is booked for days. We then cut to an interview between a talk show host and Martin Brown, the star of Midnight Animal. Martin goes in depth about his violent tendencies before realising that what is going on is nothing but a hallucination. He sees Richard, a mysterious figure who always dons a chicken mask, who warns Brown that Midnight Animal will end in a way that he does not expect, nor will he enjoy, even echoing an iconic quote from the first game. We then go through another embellished retelling of a level from the first game. This time, we're tasked with breaking into an interrogation room to kidnap a woman who the Midnight Animal has held captive for a long period of time. However, unbeknownst to Martin, script changes mean that now, instead of kidnapping the woman again, the woman will now shoot Martin Brown several times, including once on the head. This goes according to plan, all except for the fact that there was a prop misplacement, meaning that Martin was shot with a real gun, killing him instantly, and closing out Act 1. You'll notice that death is a recurring theme with Hotline Miami 2. At the end of every act, at least one character will die, and that goes on until maybe Act 5 or 6, which doesn't really let you get attached to any one specific character, but at the same time, it definitely moves the plot along very quickly. Act 2 sees the introduction of two characters, Evan Wright and the Henchman. Evan Wright is a former reporter currently writing a book about the events of Hotline Miami 1. All these little bits in reference to the first game are what make this such a great sequel, in my opinion, and they prove a sequel doesn't need the same protagonists or antagonists as the entry before it. Our introduction to Evan sees him bearing his notepad while writing down notes regarding the trial of Jacket. After this, he uses a local phone to call Manny Pardo, who he happens to be friends with, before asking for the address of a local bathhouse in order to further his research about the events of 1989. Pardo obliges and Evan gets a taxi to the bathhouse, passing a crowd outside the court. Among the crowd you'll find Alex and Ash, two of the fans, and also Biker, a deuteragonist from Hotline Miami 1. Upon arriving at the bathhouse, Evan is greeted by a security guard who turns him away. Evan proceeds to assault the guard and accidentally kills him in the process. From this point on, Evan's playstyle is entirely up to you. You can go about his levels peacefully, dismantling rifles which will ultimately increase your combo, or you're given the option to engage violently. Sure, your combo won't be as high, but you'll be able to complete the level in a much quicker fashion. Evan makes his way through the bathhouse before meeting Petrov, the man he initially planned to question. He asks Petrov some questions before leaving. Later, at a bar, Evan and Pardo are sat together, with Evan talking about his day. Pardo mentions that Evan should rather be writing about the Miami Mutilator, as it's a more recent string of murders. After this, the two head home. A month later, we cut back to the fans, who now have several phones set up in their hideout. They have these phones set up in the hopes of one of them receiving a call from 50 Blessings, unaware that they ceased operations after the end of Hotline Miami 1. After having not received any work since Down Under, Ash states that his friend needs a favour done in the form of rescuing his sister from a nearby drug den. The fans make their way through this drug den before reaching Jack's sister. She refuses to come with the fans. The fans have not only failed their mission, but have also left a loose end in the form of Jack's sister. A few weeks prior, we're introduced to the henchman. He briefly converses with the son, the current leader of the Russian Mafia after you-know-what. He proceeds to open up about how he wishes to exit the Russian Mafia. The son obliges on the condition that the henchman takes on one more job. The son gives the henchman a sample of a new designer drug that the Russian Mafia have been working on, and sends him on his way. The henchman agrees to these terms and takes out a local chop shop that's recently defected to the Colombian cartel. In the final room, however, the henchman discovers a sack of money, which he decides to keep for himself. When he gets home, he tells his girlfriend, Mary, that he has a surprise for her tomorrow, but plans to go to bed for now. The henchman dreams of driving down a highway in an expensive sports car while listening to the radio. The station he listens to then cuts to an emergency weather warning for a storm, before the henchman is greeted by Richard, who warns the henchman that he's headed towards a dead end, but the henchman does not know what this means. Richard then asks if the henchman forgot to bring his girlfriend or not. The henchman wakes up to a missing bag of money. He goes downstairs to a note from his girlfriend that reads, "Hi honey, I'm so sorry about this. You would have done the same thing if you were me. Judging by the dream that the henchman just had, we can determine that he would have done the same thing." The henchman walks outside to find that his car has also been stolen. We then see the henchman in what appears to be a dance club. He attempts to call Mary with his cell phone, but to no avail. Suddenly, the fans hastily pull up in front of the club before taking out everyone with the exception of the henchman. no matter which fan you pick to play as. For the finale, all of them show up, while they beat the henchman, who, thanks to being under the effects of the Russian drug, hallucinates that he is in the jungle. He talks of how he just wants to go home and how he'd like to call Mary, but these cries for help are ignored, closing out Act 2. Sure, while the henchman only gets one level in this game, he's arguably the most important character, as we'll see later. Act 3, aptly named Climax, immediately introduces us to Beard, a familiar face from the first game. We're also introduced to the Ghost Wolves, an elite squadron of soldiers fighting during the Russo-American War, a fictional war which will define the events of the first game. The Ghost Wolves consist of Beard, Barnes, Daniels, and everyone's favourite, Jacket. We see the Ghost Wolves in a bar, with Barnes and Daniels arguing with each other while Jacket and Beard decide to head back to camp. Just outside the bar, the two are greeted by Evan Wright, who asks if he can take a photo. The two oblige, and Evan takes 2 photos, giving one to Beard. The two then enter a jeep and head back to camp. Later on, Beard speaks to the Colonel, who briefly mentions an incoming shipment of bourbon, which highlights the Ghost Wolves' affinity for alcohol. Beard then picks up his weapon and then proceeds to his mission. By far, Beard's levels are the most experimental in the game. Rather than picking up weapons throughout the level, at the very start you're given a selection of weapons to choose from. Attempting to drop these weapons only leads to you pulling out a knife. Upon running out of ammo, you can run to an ammo box to regain a portion of your ammo. Beard proceeds to head out and clear out 3 separate enemy military camps. After this, he radios back to the Ghost Wolves, in a fashion similar to the phone calls from the first game. In the outro, we see Daniels, who has discovered intel from a dead officer, and wondering what to do with POWs. We cut back to the fans. Mark rushes in, exclaiming how they were featured on the news last night, and how he now views the fans as local celebrities. The topic soon shifts to who the next target of the fans will be. Alex mentions a gang hideout who she bought weed from. The fans decide to clear that base out. You would think that this is the end of the level, but the fan you choose to play as ends up hearing something from the one room they didn't go in. What follows next is arguably the most disturbing level in the game, as your fan clears out an underground gang hideout. At some point, they see enemies of the gang who are being dissolved in acid and having their remains poured down the drains. You clear out the underground sections and then head back to your car. There is no outro for this level. A day later, we cut back to Pardo, who's currently outside Alex's home. Alex quickly hides her disguise before seeing Pardo has let himself in. He asks Alex if she knows anything about her brother, Ash, to which Alex responds that Ash no longer lives at that home. Pardo then makes his way back to his car, but if you're observant, you'll see Pardo had planted a wallet within Alex's kitchen. Those who are extra astute will notice a man tied up in the trunk of Pardo's car. Both of these elements will come into play in the outro of this level. But for now at least, Pardo drives to a docked ship filled with members of the Colombian cartel. This level is notorious within the Hotline Miami fandom, and you know what? For very good reason, because until the penultimate act of this game, this is probably the hardest level in Hotline Miami 2. There's one point with several off-screen enemies who appear to have infinite ammo, and who all have a chance at dodging your bullet. Regardless, you clear out the ship before heading back to the entrance where you find several other members of the Miami Police Department. One of them scolds you for your reckless activity, but Pardo merely challenges this individual to bring it up with the Chief of Police. In the outro of this level, we see another of the Miami Mutilators killings. It's mentioned that his wallet was stolen at some point, and he also looks remarkably similar to the man you had in your trunk in the intro of this level. I really wonder what that could mean. Yeah, it was Pardo the whole time. I mean, from here on out, it only becomes more and more obvious that, you know, he's the killer. So 10 days later, Mark arrives with a box full of new rubber masks for fans to try on.
That's what the point of the mask is!
I am actually going to hell for that. They try the masks on, and they all happen to be those of Richard. The fans begin talking cryptically, most of them alluding to a rooftop during their speech. This is revealed to be a hallucination. We hear a phone ring. Alex rushes to the phones that were set up recently, but none of them are ringing. Rather, it's a cell phone Ash stole just after the finale of Act 2. Ash answers, and on the other end, it's the son, who's inviting who he believes to be the henchman to a party at the Russian Mafia's hideout. The fans see this as an opportunity to truly be like Jacket, and so they head out to the hideout. Act 3's finale is an all-star showcase of the fans and their abilities. There are definitely moments in this level where you can see the developers were trying to get you to use each fan's ability to some extent. This is less prevalent in Corey's section. You can do that one several times without roll dodging once. Trust me, I've done it multiple times, and for the most part I've never had to roll dodge in any of them. Fans communicate with each other via walkie-talkies. They plan to escape via heading to the rooftop before jumping over to the next building. However, only Alex and Ash make it to the rooftop. Behind them, the son approaches with a magnum before shooting them both and walking off the rooftop. In the outro of this level, we play as Pardo, who walks in on Tony, who has gathered the bodies of the other fans. Pardo sees the fans not as a threat, but as an attempt to distract the media from the Miami Mutilator, and as such, he shoots Tony, killing him instantly. On his way out, he lies to a SWAT officer that Tony was charging at him, and that he shot out of self-defense. On the way back to his car, you can find the son's corpse under a tarp, rounding out Act 3. Personally, the fans were my favourite characters in the game, as they reminded me the most of Jacket, and they also had the largest variety in playstyles. Act 3's finale will also serve as a peak of Pardo's storyline, for he falls into paranoia for being caught as the Miami Mutilator. Act 4 is the only act in the game not to introduce us to any new characters. Rather, there's a larger focus placed on Beard, who you'll remember from Act 3, although there are levels for Jake and Evan Wright. We open up this act with Evan Wright having just woken up. Looking at the house, we can tell that Evan Wright is married with children. On the desk, we see a note from his wife, telling him that she dropped off their kids at school, while also having left out a breakfast for Evan. However, Evan ignores this breakfast and goes out to visit someone whose son was a member of 50 Blessings. However, if you interact with the phone in this level before heading out, you can unlock a secret outro that happens to grant an achievement. Either way, Evan heads out to get a train ride to meet the individual he's interviewing, because by now you've probably noticed that Evan Wright doesn't have a car. On the train, he's approached by a homeless man who asks him for money. Evan gladly obliges, for this is revealed to be a Richard encounter. Evan doesn't understand what Richard is trying to tell him, so Richard morphs into Mary, Evan's wife, who scolds him for being so generous with his money, while his family are struggling to make ends meet. Mary then proposes that Evan gives up on the book, to which Evan responds that he's almost finished with it, and he just needs some more time. Richard tells Evan that time is the one thing he doesn't have, and Evan, still not understanding what Richard means, is left nothing short of confused when Richard morphs away. Evan makes his way to a train station, which he soon finds has been overrun by gang members. Evan clears out this gang hideout, at some point coming across the gang leader, who, whenever he spots you, bangs his golf club against the ground, which alerts every enemy in the level. choice on whether to go about this level peacefully or violently is again left up to you. Regardless, Evan clears the subway station of gang members and makes his way to his destination. If you didn't interact with the phone, then you get the canonical outro, where Evan meets Rosa, an old woman whose son was a member of 50 Blessings. However, if you did interact with the phone, then Evan goes to the Bar of Broken Heroes, where he meets Biker, the deuteragonist of the first game. Biker speaks of how he fled Miami after his story in the first game ended, and how an encounter with Richard broke his spirit, leading him on a downward spiral of alcoholism. The biker demands $200 from Evan for this story. However, Evan believes these to be nothing short of drunken ramblings, and goes home. We cut back to 1985, with the Ghost Wolves discussing what they plan to do after the war. Barnes intends to work as a bartender, while Daniels already has a job as a teacher. Beard chimes in, responding with, "Anything where I won't have to carry a gun and shoot people," but shortly follows up with a haunting, "Things never turn out the way you expect them to." He then decides to check up on the Colonel. Beard walks into the Colonel's cabin to find the Colonel drinking. The Colonel talks of how there's currently talks of him being promoted to Lieutenant General, and how the next mission the Ghost Wolves go on will be their last. This mission entails the Ghost Wolves storming a former hotel, which has since been overtaken by the Russians. This level definitely puts a lot of emphasis on the whole gimmick of Beard's levels. Ammo boxes are sparse, so resource management is key when it comes to this level, although it is easier to get a full combo if you manage your resources correctly. After clearing out the base, Beard greets the commander of D Company, another squadron who, unlike the Ghost Wolves, have suffered many casualties during this mission. In this level's outro, the Ghost Wolves plan to celebrate with vodka they seized from another captured Russian base. However, Beard decides to get some rest. We rejoin Jake, who, rather than using the money on a tattoo, has purchased a pinball machine. He receives another call from 50 Blessings, but this time, rather than taking it with confusion, he takes the offer and heads out. On his way, he stops by the address given to him on the 50 Blessings leaflet. The manager tells Jake that they're just about to close up. However, Jake begins to discuss his plans for the organisation, accidentally pitching 50 Blessings to themselves. He quickly finds out that it was 50 Blessings giving him the cause all along, and tells the manager he won't tell anyone else, before heading off to his mission. This level doesn't really stand out in most areas except for two. The first is where, on the first two floors, you can find meth labs that will explode upon shooting the doors to them, which alerts every enemy on that floor, which will allow you to increase your combo. The second notable feature of this level is the ending, or more specifically, the two endings, which you'll see depending on how you do on the final floor. If you die, even once, whichever enemy killed you will drag you to the bathhouse featured in Chapter 10 of the first game, which retroactively sets up you finding Jake's mask in that level. The second one is only achievable by clearing out the final floor in one go. Upon doing this and heading to the first floor, you're greeted by the manager of 50 Blessings, who instructs you to follow him in his car. Jake obliges and the two drive to a safe house. There, the manager tells Jake to stay put while he gets coffee. The manager leaves the room, letting Jake grab a floppy disk that's on the desk. The manager returns, brandishing a gun. When Jake asks what for, the manager responds, "Just a little precaution," before shooting Jake in the head. We cut to 1991, with Evan Wright examining an evidence room containing Jake's belongings at the time of his death. If you got the secret ending and collected the floppy disk, you can pick it up again as Evan to unlock a secret level in the form of the 50 Blessings officers. No matter what ending you get, however, Pardo and Evan both agree that this is the last favour that Evan will ask of Pardo. Evan walks out, and this sequence is bookended by static, which potentially signifies that none of what just happened ever actually happened, but that's up to interpretation. We rejoined the Ghost Wolves, 5 days after what was supposed to be their final mission. As it turns out, they have one more in the form of a Soviet-run power plant. The group are discussing how this is likely going to be their final mission, as how it will likely be the one that kills them. Suddenly, the Colonel storms in, donning the skin of a panther with the 50 blessings symbol scrawled into it. The Colonel rants about how, deep down, the ghost wolves secretly love what they do. Beard asks the Colonel if he's alright, and the panther skin slips off the Colonel's face. The Colonel then states he might have had too much to drink, and then goes to bed. A few hours later, Beard and the Colonel converse. The Colonel states that it's been a pleasure commanding the ghost wolves, and sends Beard on his way. Beard picks up his weapon and heads out. This level really emphasises the resource management elements of Beard's levels. You have to be very careful with how you use your ammo, because in the first area of this level, there's no ammo refill. So once you run out, you really have to hope you took care of the enemies that don't go down with melee. And if you didn't, well then it's back to the start for you. Beard clears out the power plant and is soon greeted by the rest of the ghost wolves, who witness the director of the power plant having killed everyone in the control room, sending the plant into meltdown before shooting himself. Suddenly, an alarm goes off. Beard and Daniels head to one elevator, while Jack and Bones head to another. However, the one Jack and Bones head to is booby-trapped, which injures Jacket and tears Bones in half. Daniels tends to Bones, while Beard escorts Jacket out of the power plant via an emergency exit. This part of the level is really stressful, you know? Because 1, it's a maze. 2, the lights continue to flash on and off during this portion. And 3, there's a timer. And 4, your motion is slowed. So it's a perfect recipe for a stressful moment. And you're forced to restart if the clock reaches 0, which, luckily, rest assured, doesn't really happen a lot. Beard and Jacket both make their way out of the underground tunnels. Outside, Beard radios back to base, calling for an evacuation. When finished, Jacket extends his hand, to which Beard replies, "It's on the house," before handing Jacket the picture that Evan Wright gave to Beard. In the outro of this level, we see Beard on April 3rd, 1986, exactly 3 years before the start of the events of the first game. We see Beard and Jacket conversing over the phone. The conversation turns to the photo that Beard gave Jacket. Beard asks Jacket to send him a copy when he gets the chance, but quickly hangs up in order to investigate a crowd just outside of his shop. I don't think I have to explain what happened here. All I need to tell you is that Jacket's motivation for the first game is now justified. Jacket signed up for 50 blessings and single-handedly tore apart the Russian mafia, not for his deep-rooted patriotism or his secret violent desires. He did what he did because he saw his vengeance for Beard, the man who saved his life. Act 5 is, in my opinion, the most straightforward act in the game. We start off with Evan Wright, who's currently using his typewriter. Unlike last time, his home is barren and his phone is ringing. Evan answers the phone to find that the man calling is the son of Rosenberg, a woman who Evan spoke to the previous month. The man states he'll divulge everything he knows about 50 blessings in exchange for a plane ticket from Miami to Hawaii, and Evan obliges. The man goes into depth about how he'd received calls from 50 blessings occasionally, most of them mundane, usually involving him visiting an address to draw the symbol of 50 blessings, a circle with 3 lines across. The man assumed these to be nothing but prank calls, but over time the calls became more and more threatening, reaching a boiling point on April 2nd, 1989, where the man, now revealed to be Richterberg, saw that his car was torched in the dark of night. He then sees the phone is ringing and proceeds to answer it. On the other end, a voice tells Richter that they have an appointment scheduled for the funeral of Rosenberg, his mother. Taking this as a threat, he goes up to Rosa's room to find her alive. Rosa talks about a dream she had, where Richter and his father were sitting on an island before something bad was about to happen. Rosa then states that she can't exactly remember what was going to happen, but that maybe it wasn't so bad after all. After this, Richter heads out. Most of Richter's levels play out in a similar fashion to this, so I'm gonna skim over them for the sake of time, because I want to render this in 1080p 60 FPS, and that is going to be significantly longer if I go over every Richter level in this fashion. What I am going to do, however, is just skim over the highlights of each level. Okay, so first level, Mafia Run Bar. A lot of enemies at the start, so it's very easy to get a combo. Outro makes reference to Rosa's condition. Second level, Weapons Cache. First floor is very difficult. Outro, Rosa has passed out after trying to bathe herself. More reference to her condition. Third level, I want to talk a little bit more about the intro for this one, because it's a very interesting character moment if you ask me. So what happens is, Rosa asks Richter if he'd tell her if he got into trouble, and at this point Richter tells Rosa that he's just meeting an old friend at the bar. Rosa then asks if this old friend would like to come over for tea, to which Richter responds, "Yeah, maybe," before heading out. Other than that, I've said pretty much everything I really can about Richter's first 3 levels, so let's move on to his finale. In the intro, we see Evan Wright grabbing onto a notebook, showing that his home is now covered in notes of what Richter has had to say. When he comes back though, Richter tells Evan of how one day, when he was in prison, he was visited by 2 people, known as the Janitors. The Janitors are 2 people based off Dennis Whedon and Jonathan Soderstrom. I definitely butchered those. Guaranteed I butchered those. Whose only other appearance in the Hotline Miami games consists of the end of Biker's final level in the first game. The Janitors congratulate Richter, but tell him his services are no longer necessary. Before leaving, Richter is then escorted to the prison courtyard, where another prisoner with a 50 blessings tattoo makes an attempt on his life. However, someone in the audience throws Richter a golf club, which he uses to kill the prison boss, leading to a prison riot over, undeniably, the best song in the game. This is actually, in my opinion, the most interesting level of the game, as enemy types switch halfway through as Richter changes into a police uniform, which regretfully means that now you have to deal with some of the most annoying enemies in the game. Enemies who, upon seeing you, will immediately charge you and will dodge any bullets you shoot at them. However, they do go down when you throw a gun at them, so they are very easy to take down from range. After clearing out the prison, Richter is escorted out of the building by a SWAT team, thus ending the level. Back in 1991, Richter finishes telling his story to Evan, before opening up as to what he really needs the plane tickets for. They aren't for himself, rather for his mother, so that she can come to Hawaii with Richter, so that Richter can continue to take care of his mother. Evan gladly obliges, saying it wouldn't be right to not give him the ticket, considering the circumstances. Evan thanks Richter one more time, before hanging up. After doing so, he notices a note from his wife on the desk. His wife laments about how Evan is choosing his job over his family, and Evan is left with an ultimatum. He can either continue with the book, leaving his family behind, or ring his wife, ultimately sabotaging all the work he's gone through in the hopes of finding the truth. The choice is yours. Act 6 is the final act of Hotline Miami 2. The main character of this act is the son, of course, son of the final boss of the first game. Although, unlike Act 5, there is one level dedicated to Pardo, but we'll get to that when it's time to get to that, alright? Anyway, Act 6 opens up with the henchman entering the son's office, because if you haven't already been able to tell, this game uses non-linear storytelling. The Sun tells the henchman that a new strip club run by the Colombians is opening up tomorrow, and how he's been invited. However, the Sun intends to spill blood at this opening. The henchman is pensive about this plan, but the Sun dismisses these worries and heads out. The Sun's skills are pretty much all the same as those of the fans. Bodyguard replicates Corey, except you start off with Katana. Dirty Hands is basically Tony, and Bloodline is basically Mark. The Sun's first level also has the really weird, annoying, flashy light effect from Act 4's finale. So enemies are a lot harder to see, and what makes that a lot worse is that on the first floor there's an enemy that's hiding in a bush, and you can't see that enemy until he kills you. What I do like about this level though is you can choose which room you want to go in when you clear out the first one. You can either go into a large room first and have that over and done with as soon as possible, or you can go into the smaller room first, which has 3 of the larger enemies, but at the same time gives you a shotgun with 6 bullets. No matter which way you go, the Sun clears out the strip club and heads back to his hideout. In the outro of this level, the Sun is seen celebrating while the henchman asks if he can head home. The Sun obliges, leaving a small bonus for the henchman on his desk. The bonus that the Sun gives the henchman is mere pennies compared to what the Sun took, or rather, what he will take, during his final mission. We cut to just under a month later, as the Sun and his new henchman, raising a toast to their new lives as kings of the street, before heading out on a bank heist. This level, along with the final level of the game, don't let you use your skills, which I am not really a big fan of that, but it's more of a challenge, which I'm open for that, you know? Back to the story though. The Sun and his 2 henchmen walk into a Colombian-run bank, initially acting very peaceful. Upon entering, you're given the opportunity to scout the first floor prior to combat, which I never really do when I play this level, but it's nice that the option is there, you know? However, as soon as you interact with the bag, combat begins. You pick up a gun and start shooting. This level actually features a mix of enemies, both guards and Colombians, which that is very interesting in my opinion. The Sun and his men clear out the bank before heading to the vault. There, walking past the corpse of one of the henchmen, the Sun sees apparitions of the father, the bodyguard, and the grandfather, all characters from the final level of the first game. The father asks the Sun why he's here, to which he responds that he wants to make his father proud. The father states that none of that will matter, though the Sun still does not understand. The bodyguard then puts a Richard mask on the head of the grandfather, and Richard then speaks to the Sun, saying,
"You don't get it, do you? Not that it matters anymore, it's all the same in the end. And there's nothing you can do about that, is there?"
Before the level ends. In the outro, we cut to Pardo, investigating yet another of the Miami Mutilators' murders. This time, however, a bullet casing and some fingerprints were left behind. Pardo states that his job is on the line with this case, before he heads home and goes to bed. He dreams that he can't find his magnum, and so he drives back to the murder scene to see if he left it there. At the crime scene, he's greeted by the Phantom, a doll-headed hallucination, who asks Pardo if he's looking for his gun. In early versions of the game, the Phantom was actually going to be the Miami Mutilator, but it was decided the twist that Pardo was the killer was too good to pass up. The Phantom tells Pardo that murderers always return to the scene of the crime. Before attempting to strangle Pardo, Pardo pushes the Phantom off of him, killing him instantly. He exits the room and is greeted by a golf cart, the driver of which telling him that his next scene is up. He's dropped off at the office of the Chief of Police, and is given the option to turn in his badge in exchange for a potentially lighter punishment. Pardo, however, decides to go down fighting, before clearing out the entire police station. At some point you can find Evan Wright in an interrogation room, though you can't actually enter this room. After clearing out the first 2 areas, you head to the entrance, where you're surrounded by armed policemen. Pardo attempts the same excuses he used in his first level, but is quickly gunned down before waking up. He sees a phone call from the Miami Police Department telling him to come down as quick as possible, but seeing this as a trap, he stays at home. He examines his magnum as the screen fades to black. We cut to December 14th. As Pardo is in the offices of the Russian Mafia, he asks to meet with the son, but is turned away, being told that the son isn't in right now, despite his car being outside. Pardo, frustrated, then leaves. We then cut to the son, using a captured Colombian as a punching bag while instructing his men not to be late for something, otherwise his plan will fail, before heading out to clear out the main offices of the Colombian cartel. Despite only being 3 floors, this is without a doubt the hardest level in the game. There are several points where you'll need to alternate between melees and a rifle, and on top of that, you have these really just annoying enemies that are similar to those enemies that dodge bullets in Richter's finale, except now, when you throw your gun at them, they dodge that as well, meaning your only shot at defeating them is with a melee weapon. Regardless, the son clears out the penthouse before heading to the final room. There, he confronts the boss of the Colombian cartel, as well as several enemies. The son gives the boss 10 seconds to stand down, although the boss considers this nothing more than a joke. As the son counts down, his men begin surrounding the building, and when he reaches 10... Now, if you're wondering why none of the Russian mobsters died, during editing I actually noticed that, thanks to how they're positioned, none of the bullets actually hit any Russian mobster, assuming you think every bullet is at the exact same level, which, that's more than likely the case. We fast forward to just over a week later. The son is inviting who he believes to be the henchman to the party from the end of Act 3, but gets frustrated when he hears no answer, before drowning such frustrations in the designer drug that the Russian Mafia have been distributing. One of the son's henchmen requests that the son goes easy on the pills, but these warnings are disregarded, as the son gorges himself on the new product of the Russian Mafia. What follows next is best described by just playing out the whole thing. The son goes on a drug-fueled rampage, seeing his own men as demons, and likewise slaughtering them. Among these demons, he sees the fans as the beasts they portray, with each fan boss fight drawing a little bit from the abilities of that fan. For instance, Corey appears as a lightning-fast zebra, who the son must shoot at precisely the right time. The son gets his way through the building until he reaches the rooftop, where he's confronted by Alex and Ash, who are portrayed as a 2-headed demon. The son kills the buck, as portrayed during the end of Act 3. After doing so, he is confronted by a golden gate, which opens up to reveal a rainbow bridge. The son steps onto this bridge, and is soon engulfed in a void of rainbow, unknowingly falling to his death, which rounds out Act 6 and the game as a whole. In the outro of this level, we see Richter and Rosa reunited in Hawaii, currently watching a TV program, which differs depending on your decision as Evan. Suddenly, the TV cuts to an emergency news broadcast. The broadcast details how, during a meeting of the Russo-American Coalition, a league of armed men stormed the building, assassinating the presidents of both America and Russia. Rosa reaches into her bag, pulling out a Richard mask, before Richter and Richard have their moment. Richter is led to believe that the police are finally catching on to him, but Richard assures him that what's going on is much, much worse. Richter, catching on to what Richard is saying, accepts this, and Richard tells him,
"Leaving this world is not as scary as it sounds."
I don't think I have to explain what happens next. Richter and Rosa are wiped away in an instant. alongside everyone else we played as. During the credits, we get to see how each living character spent their last moments. Evan is either reunited with his family or adding the finishing touches to his book. Pardo is seen drunk, holding his magnum to his currently barricaded door. The girl from Midnight Animal had been taken to alcoholism to cope with the accidental death of Martin Brown. And Jacket, the one responsible for almost everything in this game, in his prison cell, examining a green stress ball.
Tactical nuke incoming! Happy feet!
So, why? Was any of this worth it? Personally, I'd have to say yes and no. No, because everything gets wiped away once you finish the game, and yes, because of what happens when you start a new one. Upon beating the game and starting a new one on either difficulty, you're granted with what is known as the table sequence, where Richard personally speaks to almost every playable character in the game. Richard begins his address with,
You all know how this ends, don't you?
This statement proposes the horrifying truth that all the characters of this game know how it will end, but are forced to act the same way, no matter what. This is echoed at several other points in the game, such as you being warned when trying to play the final level on its own, as well as in blood-scrawled messages that Pardo left as the Miami Mutilator, all of them making reference to how he was forced to kill by a mysterious figure. I mentioned earlier that Martin Brown was supposed to represent the player, and I definitely feel that still stands. During Martin Brown's moment with Richard, he adamantly refuses to step down from Midnight Animal, which ultimately results in his death. Likewise, our refusal to step away from the game is what has resulted in all of this brutality. In order for the bloodshed to end, and for the characters to be at peace once and for all that we can do is close the game and do something else. Or there's the level editor, none of that is canon, none of that bloodshed is canon, no harm, no foul. Epic montage in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so for this bit of the video I was going to have a level editor montage where it's basically just a montage of cool clips from me playing custom levels, but in the end I just couldn't really be bothered to edit all that together, so yeah. Before the end of the video, I just want to give some special thanks. Firstly to the Hotline Miami wiki for providing invaluable dialogue transcripts that saved me a lot of time during writing and voicing. They also have a transcript of the Hotline Miami notebook, which is incredibly hard to find, and is where I learned that the Miami Mutilator was going to be a separate character. If you want to read the notebook for yourselves, or are just curious about any specific level from the first or second game, I highly recommend checking them out. I'll leave a link to them in the description. Second is Janitors Games, for, you know, being the guys who made the game I just spent the best part of an hour talking about. And lastly is you. Whether you had this open in another tab, or you grabbed your popcorn and watched this the whole way through, thank you for watching. I know this was longer than the sort of thing that I usually make, but rest assured next video will probably be a lot shorter than this. So if you like this, subscribe, like the video, and yeah, see you next time.